Hello, it is 2 p.m. Welcome to this afternoon's event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. If you would like to send questions during the program, you can do so via the chat window at the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device. You should be able to see the option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Take it away, Midori.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on this beautiful afternoon, hottest day so far this spring, and also in this difficult time period. We are really pleased to present 11 more BFA students who are currently having online exhibition on our gallery website. We'll actually but part of the College of Arts and Science at NJCU. If you look up Visual Arts NJCU on website on the internet, you will see it. So today we are having a special guest speaker, critic, who is the curator and director of the Walsh Gallery at Seton Hall University in South Orange. And Jim Brazil has had more than 20 years of experience in working in various museums and curating numerous exhibitions. In addition to that, she also has curated in this pandemic period, it's called something called pandemic projections, right outside of her home apartment in Seneca, New Jersey. She has another projection coming up tonight at 8:45. So she'll be speaking and responding to each student speaker today. We have 11 students coming up in this order that appears on screen. Okay, so shall we start with the first student, Karla?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So hello, my name is Karla Almonte, and I just completed my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Digital Design and Illustration. So the project that I'm about to present to you is called Pérdidas. And in this project, I'm criticizing a misogynistic culture, which I form part by default. And it's with the purpose of bringing awareness to an epidemic that keeps happening in my country, Dominican Republic, which is feminicide, and it is killing women for being women. So what brought my attention to this project was the case of Emily Peguero. She was a pregnant 16-year-old that was murdered by her boyfriend and the mother's boyfriend because she did not want to perform an abortion. So she was left in a suitcase in the middle of the road in 2017. The mother only got 5 years of a sentence, and it was reduced to 2 years. And the son only got 30 years, but it will probably be reduced because the mother has influence in the government, and she has a lot of connections. So this was just one of the cases that became mainstream in 2017, but there were plenty of murders that took place before and after that did not get the same attention. With this project, all I want is to spark up conversation and bring awareness, since even though we are not in the Dominican Republic, we can see how money and power divert our attention from these issues. Issues that delve into brutality against women and patriarchy and power. So I am presenting a set of digital illustrations that were made in Procreate and Photoshop. And those victims have impacted my lives and the lives of a community. And my plan is to create a memorial that honors them, but also brings awareness to the issue and makes us question our involvement and our awareness, since we cannot be innocent bystanders. So this slide right here, it's called Diana Duran Bonilla, which is, she was a 17-year-old that went missing for 3 days. During January 21st in 2019. She wanted to leave the relationship with her boyfriend, but he was not content with that idea. So he killed her and left her locked in his apartment. And she was found in state of decomposition in his apartment. He was roaming around the country as if he did not do anything. And even though people reported him, he was not being investigated. What really brought my attention to her was the fact that she wanted to go back to school. She previously left school because of the relationship, and she wanted to become a lawyer. He was eventually given 20 years of prison, but it will probably be reduced because of overcrowding in the prisons. The next slide, please. The next one is Mosandra Mateo, who was stabbed 24 times, and she was only 22 years old, in May 29th of 2019. So he was sent to prison, but they never released any details besides the fact that they found evidence in his home. And they saw him with her the night before. So the fact that she had a darker complexion made the case go under mainstream. So they did not really publish it in the news, and they did not give as much attention to her as other victims. The next slide. Then this one, she is Nairobi Natalie Perez Reyes. She was killed in March 26th of 2019, and she was 33 years old. She is from my hometown. She was a teacher. She had 3 kids, and she thought my cousins, my nephews, around the school. So her husband stabbed her and killed her, and eventually called one of their daughters to tell her that she had to take care of them, and that he had done it. And then afterwards, he killed himself. She had reported the abuse in 2016 and again in 2018, but the authorities did not do anything. So he ended up killing her, even though he had already given signs of harassment and of violence. The next slide. So the next slide, the last one that I showed in my online presentation is Anibel Gonzalez Ureña, who was killed August 31st of 2019. She was 30 years old. She was a lawyer with a master's in immigration affairs, and she left 3 daughters. The husband killed her in front of their children, and he had already assaulted her 2 years prior, and he was sent to jail for 5 years, but only served 18 months. While he was still in jail, he harassed her, even though she was not even in the country. He continued to call her, but still the authorities did not take any action because we as women, we're the second citizens. We are not really important in our culture. So after killing her, he killed himself, obviously. And then the next slide, please. So some of the artists that inspired my project were Gerard Richard, who created a similar project in 1977, and he depicted victims of a terrorist group. Also, it was Celeste Walls Hill, which is a Dominican artist, and Georgie Morel, which have a similar style and illustration. So I used them as inspiration. So to close my presentation, from the years of, I would like to say some statements and the statistics. From the year of 2005 to 2019, the state reported that there were only 1,200 cases reported. However, the UN, a sub-branch of the UN, they reported that there were more than 1,700 cases in the country. So there have been a lot of discrepancies when it comes to statistics, and the state is being complicit by not being transparent with the statistics, and they're not showing the magnitude of the issue in its entirety. The Attorney General keeps saying that the cases are slowing down 25%, but the events that keep occurring do not match up with the statistics. And the institutions such as the UN and others that are doing independent research, they're showing that the statistics that they're saying, they're not correct. So the victims are being dismissed when pressing charges. They end up dead. They're tampering the statistics, changing the methods of collecting the statistics just so they can mislead us. And they're letting the criminals roam free. 15% of the criminals are roaming around the country without going to prison, being charged, and they're not being prosecuted. So yearly, we have more than 100 women being killed, and 30% of the women in the population are being abused, and only 1% is reporting the cases because we have no laws that protect these women and they do not want to speak up. So gender violence is the fourth leading cause of death among women in DR. And that is because the culture continues to reinforce machismo and patriarchy, and it just continues to objectify women, and they're normalizing violence in relationships. As I mentioned before, they're seeing women as second-class citizens. So the purpose of my project is to bring awareness to the fact that outside of the US, they're still killing women. They're killing women for the skin color. They're killing women for not wanting to be engaging in these relationships. And they're killing women just for being women. So yeah, that is what my project is about. That's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Karla. Marjelyn will be the next.
Hi, my name is Marjelyn, and today I will be presenting my book that is based on a Philippine folklore. I've always been interested in mythologies, folklores, and some dark psychological themes, but I've never known of the folklores in my country until one of my older cousins told me a story of what he had experienced when he was young. It was in the middle of the night and everyone was asleep. Him and his brother were playing just outside of the house, and they were smudging coal on their face as punishment to whoever loses. As they kept playing and laughing at each other's faces, they heard another laughter other than theirs. They looked around, but there was no one there. But they just let it be, for they thought it was a duende that was watching and laughing at them. I didn't know what a duende was until I researched about it and found some interesting Filipino folklores. Next slide, please. First, a duende is a dwarf or goblin in English. There are many more creatures that lurks around in the forest in the Philippines, and some Filipinos believe that these creatures could exist. One that I particularly used for my book is a dwarf that lives on a mound or an anthill. These creatures could be easily angered if someone destroys their home, and that person will get cursed by having swollen arms, legs, vomit blood, or even urinate black liquid. That could be considered as abnormal illnesses, and regular medicines can't cure it. Even normal doctors can't help them at all. So they would have to call for a witch doctor to ask what cursed them and how to lift that curse. Next slide, please. Most Filipinos would use these folklores to scare their children from going outside at night or to teach them a lesson, and I want to have the same feeling. That's why I thought of making a book that could be read and shared aloud with others as if telling just ghost stories at night. To have that horror theme, I used some dark, muted colors, and I was also inspired by an artist named Kenny Leoncito. He used some charcoal and crayon-like brushes in his digital illustrations. And so I have used a similar brush just to have that gritty, rough texture into the sinister and dark theme in my illustrations. Next slide, please. The book also tells a moral story. As I've said before, that folklores were used to teach children a lesson. The moral lesson in this book is to think about one's actions carefully and try to treat everyone the same that try to treat others the same that others would treat you. Overall, the book was made for horror entertainment, but also to have a lesson for someone to remember. And this is the book that I've created. Thank you. That's the end of my book.
Thank you, Marjelyn. It went very fast. It's okay. I'm sure there will be some questions. Brian next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Bransky. Today I'll be talking about Project Meditations on Nature. Meditations on Nature are photographs of native nature as found around waterways, surrounding the urban areas in Jersey and New York. My focus with this project was to capture the beauty in these natural areas. This project started during my visits to Portugal and Spain. The Iberian Peninsula has many rural areas that have not been touched by industry. I want to take the opportunity to explore this beauty and to share it with the public. I want to give the viewer the opportunity to experience these landscapes as I have. I've been to Portugal many times in my life to visit my family, always enjoying my time there. With its many places to see throughout the countryside, its beaches, and historical old world architecture found in many cities, it's always hard to come back to New Jersey. Next slide, please. In my photo book titled Meditation 1, I showcase the differences and similarities I saw between traveling to Spain and Portugal with the vast landscape and beautiful architecture. I had the opportunity to photograph Celtic architecture ruins in the northern part of Spain. Next slide, please. When I came back to the United States, I was inspired to explore natural elements in our urban landscape. I wanted to focus on bodies of water surrounded by industrialization. Next slide, please. I explored the Hackensack River, the Colvan Coal Strait, and Newark Bay. Nature found in these locations greatly contrasts with that of the Iberian Peninsula's natural landscape. With these locations greatly contrast with that of the Iberian Peninsula's natural landscape. With this in mind, I want to explore how industrialization had taken over New Jersey's once intensely beautiful waterways. Whether pleasure or disgust, I look at the beauty found not only in the undisturbed landscape of the Iberian Peninsula, but the beauty found in New Jersey's wetlands areas. In this photo's aerial view, you can see the magnitude of industrialization's impact on these areas. There's still beauty to be found as seen while looking out from Bayonne Bridge down on the Colvan Coal. While these waterways are over-industrialized, they are still able to hold on to that beauty and all that inspired me in Portugal and Spain. It might not be of that natural beauty found there, but was left behind of the balance of machinery and a burden of industry on these waterways. Next slide, please. Something that captured my imagination while taking these photos of industrial areas was the surreal impact their massive size has on the landscape and on me. Objects such as very large towering cranes and ships felt so surreal to me. I could feel how they imposed their will on these areas, leaving no room for the natural world. In this image, I wanted to show how massive industrialization is and the impact Port Newark has on the Newark Bay. There are no signs of nature, just man-made objects. If you look closely at this image, you can see barrels that are floating in the water and ships carrying cargo. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This photo was taken in northern New Jersey along the Hackensack River. As you can see, there are trees that surround the river, reflecting into the water. The only depiction of industrialization here is the bridge that goes over the river and the buildings that are present in the background. I wanted to compare and contrast the environment of the Iberian Peninsula and that of the industrial environments surrounding much of our metropolitan area. I wanted to show how these environments are treated differently and how the Iberian Peninsula is cleaner and more environmentally friendly. Our metropolitan area has more cities, making these environments dirty and overconsumed by industrialization. Seeing these rural areas inspired me to show people that there is still beauty in the world in places that are untouched by mankind. In New Jersey, I was inspired to show the unforeseen beauty in nature that is overshadowed by industrialization. These photos are appreciation of beauty found in nature, whether in rural areas or in urban industrial areas. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next speaker is Olivia Boules.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Boules. I'm a painting and drawing major at NJCU. This series is about myself and my identity through paintings of my family. There are personal connections in the work that are layered and complex, revolving around family, immigration, and women. As a whole, I explore my American, Italian, Egyptian background. Next slide, please. So this is a family portrait taken over 40 years ago on the day my father left Egypt alone, saying goodbye to his family. The other two people is my grandmother on the right and my great-grandmother in the center. When I first saw this photo, I was a bit shocked because I had never recognized them as a part of my family before. How they are positioned while their portrait is taken is symbolic to the roles and dynamic that men and women have in Egyptian culture. As the start of my father's journey to America, this painting was the start to my own journey exploring my Egyptian identity. Next painting. As I started to recognize my Egyptian side, this next painting recognizes my Italian American side. It's a portrait of my Aunt Mary, who passed last year. Her and my grandfather, along with her other 10 siblings, were also the children of a Sicilian immigrant. This was a moment I saw her sitting on the porch of her home where she also raised her own family. It is a very quaint moment that also reflects my feelings of loneliness and search through introspection of my identity. Next slide. My next painting is based from a photo I captured of my Aunt Mona on my visit to Egypt in summer of 2018. It was my first time visiting Egypt since I was 2 years old. So everything was very new and fresh. I admired her peaceful and strong energy that followed her character. When we stayed with our cousins in Cairo, she took care of me and my sister as a mother would, trying to make us as comfortable as we felt out of place there. So I also chose her because when I went to Egypt, I also experienced what women do in that culture. And it was very jarring to me. I didn't expect to feel so out of place in a society that's largely dominated by men. And also my family in Egypt are a religious minority of Coptic people. On her dress is the Ankh, which is the key of life. But Coptic Egyptians, they originally took the Ankh, and that is where the cross came from. So it's very symbolic to where my family came from, and also what their struggles are in the modern society of Egypt today. Next painting. So this is actually a drawing instead of a painting, but it's pastels of my father. More recently, he's a car mechanic, and when he originally came to Egypt, he had dreams of being an engineer. So all his life, I grew up with him being a car mechanic and seeing how passionate and hardworking he was with his profession. So this is about him and his immigration story and his life. And in a way, I also am very connected to my dad. We're a lot alike, and I sort of relate to the nature of working with tools and mechanics. I'm also a bicycle mechanic myself, and I think I really picked that up from him. So part of my journey into this was sort of through my father, since he's the strongest connection I have with my culture on that side. And that's my work.
Thank you, Olivia. Next speaker is Katy Burdge.
Hi, everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
everything's great, Katy.
Okay, good. So my name is Katy Burdge. I'm a drawing and painting major at New Jersey City University. I'm going to be showing some pieces, some paintings from my thesis titled Bodies of Water. So I'm showing a few of those. You can see all of them at my website. Next slide. So The inspiration behind all of these actually comes from my best friend. We've known each other for 16 years, and I painted a portrait of her at the beach as part of an assignment. The response I got from her about the portrait was incredible. She, of course, loved that I painted her, but she was so, her self-confidence had been boosted by it. She was so in love with the painting. She felt amazing about herself. She couldn't stop talking about it. She displayed it in her house after it was completed. And that caused me to think about, you know, the way I view people, the way people are portrayed, the way people see themselves. And I know when you go to the beach, you're expected to wear a swimsuit. A lot of times those can be revealing, and whether you're going to the beach, the pool, anytime you're in the water, you're supposed to wear a certain type of clothing that's very revealing. We reveal ourselves during that time, and no matter how confident and happy you are with your body, there's this, it all goes away in that moment. Once you put a swimsuit on and reveal yourself, you just lack that self-confidence. Next slide, please. So her response had been incredible, and it made me rethink all of those things. Now, every person I've painted in this series is somebody I know, somebody that's close to me, somebody who has had an impact on my life. And I had chosen to paint people that I know because, like, I could get pictures of them, references with them, but also I wanted them to have a say in what happens in these paintings. It was important to me to paint what I wanted to paint, but also to paint something that was shared with the person in the painting. They were equally as much a part of this as I was in creating it. Now, I painted several of these. There's a couple of here, there's about 10 in total. And they all take place at the beach for the reasons I just discussed, but also I wanted to use that feeling, that sense of like self-consciousness to kind of showcase what it feels like to actually be confident in yourself. And I wanted to explore like ideas of feminism and body positivity and loving yourself, feeling beautiful. Next slide, please. Now, the title of the series, Bodies of Water, actually came to me by accident. I was considering, you know, sure, there are bodies of water in each of these, you know, the ocean. When we think bodies of water, we're considering significant amounts of water, hence the ocean. But bodies of water can be any significant amount of water, including lakes or rivers, even puddles, as it turns out. And that started making me think, if it's any significant amount of water, even a puddle, well, there's a significant amount of water in the human body. So to me, it occurred to me that you could think of these bodies, these people, as bodies of water. And being that it's a significant amount of water that causes it to be a body of water, I consider all of these people to be significant. Not only to me, like they're significant to me because they're people I care about, but they're also significant in life, in the world that we walk in. Every one of these women that I painted are significant and powerful, and we can respect them for being themselves, for existing, for living through the struggles of life, but also for being brave enough to bear themselves not only at the beach, to the eyes at the beach, but also in these paintings. I mean, these are going to be seen by many people. They're being seen by strangers right now, but that was significant to me. Next slide, please. And so my goal was to capture that self-confidence, that positivity. I wanted to show that these women are beautiful, even if sometimes they don't think they are. And I want to show that they're significant, not only to me, but to the world. And so I thought Bodies of Water was a fitting choice for all of those reasons. My process for this was we actually went to the beach itself. We took numerous pictures, so many pictures, doubles, triples of the same pose, just because there was always a slight variation. There was always going to be something slightly off in the picture. So I took as many references as I could. We spent a lot of time. I took a lot of time to pick the right picture based on all these subtle differences. Once they were chosen, I started the painting process. I did underpaintings. I did several layers of paint. And I tried to capture the essence of the person. I didn't want to just copy, the picture I had taken, but it was important to me to capture the essence of the person. So I didn't want to make them pose in a way that wasn't true to themselves. Like if somebody was more like a quiet, subtle, like shy person, I wasn't going to make them do some sort of grandiose gesture, some grand pose if that felt wrong to them, because it was important for this to feel right to me and to them. And so each one is unique. Each one kind of shows a little bit into the personality of the subject. And I feel that I captured that well, and I've gotten a lot of positive responses so far from these paintings. So I think I did okay in that respect. And I guess, this was also a challenge for me because this last painting is a self-portrait. So I had to kind of believe all the things I was saying, and that was a little tough for me. But I think I did it, because I feel that what I've said about myself, about these women, is true 100%. And I think that was the challenge, besides the painting, was having everyone feel that, having everyone believe those things. And I think that was successful. And I think that's the last slide. So I guess that's it.
Okay, Katy, thank you so much. Your very candid speech. And Justin Cannon's next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Cannon. I'm a graphic design major, and my project is going to be on branding and identity. A little bit of background about myself. I'm a Jersey City native. Growing up, I always had like a passion for art and cars. It was like this ongoing thing. So I'm gonna just briefly explain like what this logo is for, like this brand is for. So this brand is actually for a passion project that I've had for a couple of years named Crystal Cannon. It's an electric car company, and it's been ongoing for some time. Some inspiration behind the logos include Chevy, Ford, like a lot of American companies. Like I stated, the logo has taken me about 2 years to reach this point. So the logo, like the top part of the logo, is actually derived from the first version of the logo that I had. I'm paying homage to that first time I decided to take my ideas and put it on paper and go after it. So in the middle, you notice that there's a diamond in the middle. So that's how I kind of derived the first part of the name, which is Crystal. The two C's, if you look at it, there's like a reverse C on it, is actually for the name of the brand. And Cannon just happens to be my last name, because it seems like a lot of car companies like to do that, like Lamborghini, Ferrari, and so on. Next slide, please. All right, so right here are my branding guidelines, a couple of pages. This kind of goes over the variations of the logo, some color choices. I tried to be very minimal with like the colors because I didn't want a bunch of bright colors. I wanted to keep a kind of corporate, smooth, cold look to it. Basically, the top version of the logo has like a dark gray kind of color because it's actually embossed. So if it was 3D printed, the two C's in the logo would actually be kind of pushed in. The second one is just a dark black variation. I have a lot of variations of the logo because for like media purposes, ad purposes, like for, just to have a lot of variation. And then the one on the black just displays the type on the reverse side. The page to the right goes over in specific some of the colors. So I have like the PMS, the RGB of the colors. I have this electric blue is what I'm calling it because the car company is actually an electric car company. Pure white. Then I have like a gray, like a really dark gray, and then a true black. The bottom visual at the bottom just kind of displays how all the colors might work together. Next slide. So on the left side here, I'm working on logo spacing. So I feel like when building a logo, it's important to have negative space around it so it can breathe and it can show true. You don't want a lot of clutter around it or it distracts from the actual logo. So here you'll see like measurements of the minimum amount of space allowed around the logo. And then the bottom part just kind of shows the logo, like if you were to make it into like a tag or something. And to the right, I decided to do some merchandise design. So for this shirt, I imagined it to be like an employee shirt if this was like a hypothetical business. Just a really clean, simple, just logo on the shirt. But I didn't want to do the typical on the right side of your shirt thing. So I decided to blow it up across the chest. Next slide. Here I started experimenting with some other stuff like hats, because I was thinking about like types of merchandise, because a car company, you wouldn't really think they'd give merchandise specifically. So I decided to do hats. Guess this can go for like that kind of racing feel. So I got provided a black and a white option. And on the right, this is one of my more like free kind of designs. Like I would probably just wear this shirt just to wear the shirt. And I used the graphic from before to kind of make this cool design. I put it off to the left because I just like the way it looks. It looks very different. I'm big on being different. Next slide. So this page is actually a sneak peek into a prototype of one of the cars that I was working on. I've done a lot of car design in my time. I've never like professionally had car design like teachings. Like I kind of just did it since I was younger. Exposure to Hot Wheels might be inspiration behind that. On the left, this is just like some basic specs. I don't know if many of you know much like about cars and stuff like that, but acceleration, it's not really that important. To the right, that's one of the designs that I was planning on working on. It was probably a design I developed maybe 2 years ago and then just kept pushing for it. Next slide. This final slide here is my stationery mock-up. So this provides like a business letter, a business card, and then envelope. So again, I'm sticking with this clean corporate look. Wanted to keep a lot of white around the logo. I think the logo looks really clean on white. This blue line is like a really common thing you see. It's just like to go with the logo and its cleanness, showing that electric blue all the time. And that's basic. Oh, well, one last thing. This is basically just like the graphic design portion of the show. And a physical show would probably show things like an actual 3D mock-up of the car, you know, like a 3D printed version of the logo, because those were all things that I plan to have. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Jean. At this moment, after 6 student presentation, we'd like to turn to Jean, Brazil. Are you ready, Jean, to comment or ask some questions? And we can also receive questions from the audience.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can, I can read the questions from the audience. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to have questions for everyone, but
Okay, okay.
please do start. We can go back to the first slide then.
Okay, I just wanted to start by just offering my congratulations to everybody. I know this has been an extremely hard semester for the students, but also for the faculty. I know everybody did not plan on having your semester end this way, but I think you've all done a wonderful job. And I just want to say I'm very pleased to have been invited to this. Furthermore, I think working at another university, I have to say that I think all of you are exceptionally well prepared. I was pleased to see how many of you had your own websites and statements already at this point in the game. I speak to graduate students that sometimes don't have these things prepared. So you're really ahead of the game and extremely professional, both in the way you're presenting yourselves and in the materials that you're compiling in preparation for what comes beyond school. So thank you for that and congratulations. Maybe I'll just go in order with some of the comments I had. So I kind of, how much do we have for this little section, Midori? Before we have to wrap it up and move on to the second half.
I was allocating up to 3, so we have close to 20 minutes.
Okay, good. I don't have to rush. Yeah. Fabulous. That's helpful. So, you know, starting with Karla, you know, this is a really strong series of portraits, but furthermore, I think that the socio-political and feminist content is extremely compelling and engaging. And I like the fact that even though these women have been victims of violence and been murdered, that you're presenting them as full people, the way they were when they were living, and not as a symbol for victimhood necessarily. I think that's a trap that a lot of art can fall into, particularly when you're addressing difficult subjects like this. I think it gives the artist a particular amount of dignity. And can I ask questions of the artist, or am I just commenting?
Yes, they each can respond to your question.
That's great. So for Karla, what were your considerations in presenting your subjects in this way? Did you struggle with how to present them, or did you find this format came to you naturally? And can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I struggled. My mentor, Ailyn Quinns, know that. Like every week I would go to her and I would just vent to her. Like I didn't want to exploit the image of the victims. I wanted to create like a memorial and honor them, rather than just make it so harsh, because it's a depressing subject by itself. So I did not want it to be like so saddening that you feel like you cannot do anything about it. We wanted to make something that inspired you to look up feminist sites and wanted you like make you take action about it. So yeah, I definitely struggled. I started with like really closed frames, very zoomed in the picture, and then I started to take it back a bit, and I felt like that just added a little bit more of humanity, and then just blending the hair with the background, and then them just disappearing, and then keeping the same constant white clothing to keep it like a series. So yeah, I definitely struggled, but at the end we kind of figured it out and just kept it with the same constant composition.
Yeah, no, that's very, very effective. And I actually teach a section on difficult knowledge and exhibitions to my graduate students. And one of the things we speak about is, you know, how do you portray subjects like this in a constructive way that gets your message across, but without exploiting the people you're depicting and having people come away with the wrong message about these people and their humanity. I think you've done a wonderful job. And I did notice that yes, the black background and the white clothing, so there's enough room for difference because you're focusing on the people and their humanity, and yet there's enough continuity between the imagery that you can make these kinds of comparisons. If you were to show this in a gallery, and I know that's ultimately what you were thinking about before this all began, what kind would you display these on their own or with some sort of text, or would you consider maybe objects that were symbols or maybe personal items that may have belonged to these women? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so at the beginning I had the plan of making like an altar, which was inspired by Pepon Osorio, which she does like similar work. So I was considering that and then adding like written pieces about their story. But I wanted to make them a little poetic, and I didn't get the chance to explore that to include it in the online exhibition. So I am definitely including that in the fall exhibition in October, or whatever it will be.
Looking forward to seeing that. I think also too, when you have subject matter like this, I think you mentioned it, you know, some sort of constructive exercise or room for reflection for the viewer, whether it's responding in writing or drawing a picture or being able to tell their own story. I think that would really help push that message along and help people personalize it, so it's not like the other and becomes their own.
Yeah, because people didn't really get, you don't really get the message across just by looking at the picture. It could be just a regular person. So I feel like adding that narrative will definitely help in the show or exhibiting in a gallery.
Yeah. Well, it's a fabulous series. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you so much.
Is it Marjelyn? Is that how you say her name?
Marjorie, right?
Marjelyn?
It's Marjelyn.
Marjelyn, I'm so sorry. You know, again, I think that some of the work that you're showing, you know, collectively as a group is so strong and resonates because you're really digging into personal experience, and that's the best art can be, is when you dig into something that resonates with you personally and then being able to take it and put it into a public forum in a meaningful way. So I love that you're going into the idea of the folktale, which is a universal way of storytelling and when teaching morality, but it's also going back into your Filipino heritage. So it's both specific and universal at the same time, and I think it's very strong because of that. And I love that you recognize that these folktales are morality plays. They're not just children's stories. Did you rewrite the text with your own understanding of the folktale, or did you copy this from an existing text?
No, I made this as my own story, and then I just tried to find what this folktale was. So yeah.
Okay. So I love the imagery too. I think the idea, you're giving yourself almost like a double task, because now you're a writer and an illustrator, trying to balance those two roles.
Yes.
And I think that you've done that very successfully. I think the images, and you were talking about, I'm just going back to my notes, like dark psychology, and this use of painterly imagery.
Yeah.
I think it functions nicely, particularly in the slide on the left page.
Yes.
It's got that dark, scary kind of quality to it, and it's very illustrative. And it's also, sorry, I'm a little bit losing my train of thought. There was a truck that just went past. But there's something very haunting about it and psychological. And then when you get into the page on the right with the characters, you also use their facial expressions as well as their body language very effectively to communicate some sort of, difficulty or friction or complication that's taking place. And do you mind going to the next slide, please? So here, and I think that you do, again, a very good job with the, like you mentioned, like the facial features and the psychology of it all. I would say when, if you're looking at the right-hand slide, just be careful about the contrast. The illustration is great. The text is a little bit illegible because it doesn't have enough contrast with the background. And you need to just be mindful of that when you're doing these illustrations. Maybe you could have made the drawing a little bit smaller, or maybe just made the illustration a little washier at the top to give that contrast. But overall, it's just a very minor kind of persnickety criticism on my part. I think
Yes,
that again,
I noticed that also, and I was having trouble trying to make that the text legible, but yeah, I'm still improving that for.
Okay, good. But again, I think it's a really strong series. The other thing, if you're going to continue writing, is this is one of the most difficult things for me as a curator, is getting across a lot of information in an economy of words. Also, what you're doing as an artist, you're getting across a lot of information in an economy of image, and I would, and you're doing that very successfully. I would say maybe try to emulate that with the text, is try to trim down the text to come up with the same information, and that might alleviate that, also the text competing with the background like we have on the image on the right.
Okay.
But again, in the grand scheme of things, it's very minor. I think that you're doing a really great job of that psychological, kind of like haunting and a little bit scary, because that's what folk tales do. They kind of scare you into conformity and into behaving and acculturating you in a certain way. And I like that you're acknowledging that. And I love that this is kind of an exploration for you, reaching back into your own heritage.
Yes.
What did you learn, or what might you do going forward that's different, or what did you take away from this?
Well, I've always been interested in like my culture, and I'm just trying to find and researching more about these things, trying to see what I can do with this kind of work. And I'm not sure.
Did you go back and look at any other illustrations or any other folk tales from Filipino culture or elsewise?
Yes, but most of the folktales that they have are not as haunting or scary as mine. It's more of a fun-looking, bright children's or book or folktales that they have. So I kind of want to make a different story.
Maybe you might want to look at some old German folktales, because those tend to be pretty scary and have that kind of like psychological tension maybe that you're alluding to, and see maybe how they illustrate some of their folktales, and come up with that quality that you're striving for, at least in this series.
Yes.
But I love that you're reaching into your own particular culture and interest, and again, that's going to make the art that resonates best.
Thank you.
Brian. Great. So this series is very interesting to me, and I like that you're looking at the built environments, and you're looking at both in a historical sense, like an archaeological sense, but also in a very contemporary context, conflating the Hackensack Riverfront and loading containers with these Celtic rock formations. And they are very similar. They're vestiges of civilizations. And I love that you're making those relationships. And I like also that you're thinking about Europe and America, present day and past, but also nature and the built environment. There's a lot of dualities going on here. I think it's very smart. And it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite artists, and he happens to be a local New Jersey artist who did a lot of work in the Meadowlands, Robert Smithson. Are you familiar with him?
No.
So Robert Smithson did a lot of photography, But he also did what it seems that you're doing by just walking. Are you walking around these areas and spending time in them as you photograph
Yeah, I
them?
spent like a good couple hours there taking pictures and taking a bunch of photographs.
I can feel that looking at the photos. It doesn't look like you're going there and busting out a shot and then leaving and then getting back in your car. It looks like you're becoming intimate with the subject.
Yeah.
It definitely comes across in the imagery. And I like that you don't see a difference between art and nature. And in some ways, in the slide that's shown right now on Sunset, that bridge going between the one bank of the river to the other with trees, but also the high rises in the background are all visible. It's kind of like a culmination of all the previous images that you showed in your PowerPoint. I think it's a nice summation of your subjects. One second, I'm running out of, excuse me. It's kind of like an encapsulation of all the previous ideas that you were showing us. And again, I like that you're reaching into your background, your heritage. You know, I think that that's, again, going to make all of your work very successful, or it's what's made the work that we're looking at successful, is that you're not reaching into something that's, you know, you have a tenuous relationship. It's really going into your past or into maybe your present. So I just have a leading question, and it's not because I'm sort of like a person that likes to ask people to read against the grain. What in your mind makes these maybe artistic as opposed to documentary? And I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just curious.
It's just like the way like you capture it with your camera, you know, like in a certain way, and also it's like the colors that are present in through like the lens, pretty much. And I just find it like poetic. Like when you take pictures of like nature, it just like has like a poetic sense to it, like always like a story behind it in a way.
So can I paraphrase and maybe say intention?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that comes across as well. You know, I can see that these are very clearly blocked out and thought about. So is this your final semester? Is this everybody's final semester?
Yeah.
Okay. So where do you guys go from here? What are your plans? Like, what do you want to do with everything you've learned? What's your next step?
Well, either to be a photographer or a graphic designer.
I think you can be both.
Yeah, that's what my plan is to do, is both actually.
As a matter of fact, I'm working with a couple of artists presently that do both. Like the graphic design brings in a little bit more money generally, but they're complementary, I think. They're both art. And I actually like that NJCU is set up so that you've got art and design and graphic arts all kind of together, and not as separate, distinct units. I think that's maybe a false distinction, and so your work and your career goals kind of demonstrate that. So I think maybe it might be interesting for you to look up Robert Smithson and see some of his sites and non-sites, and look at some of the work he did on the Passaic River further up, before it dumps into the Hackensack Bay. He was very interested in documenting construction and bridges and areas where there was cement, but he also spent a lot of time walking around the Meadowlands and documenting that in film. And so maybe that will give you some sort of historical framework for what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see that.
Yeah. And you might get something out of that. And he's super crazy famous. He's one of my favorite artists. You can see him also at the Dia Beacon if you happen to go up there. It's just like a train ride up to Beacon, New York, maybe an hour and a half away
Beacon,
from
New York?
us. Beacon, New York. Yeah, it's a beautiful, it's actually kind of funny. It's a beautiful old museum. Well, it's a new museum, but in an old box factory.
Okay.
So it's in nature, but it's also like an old industrial site. So the museum itself also lends itself to what you're doing.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. Really enjoyed your series. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Olivia. can we just like go to one of the slides? There we go. So I'm sorry I didn't get to look at your work in advance, Olivia, but I was really interested to see what you're painting and what your conversation is. You were talking about, you know, getting an essence of who these people were, and I feel a real sense of dignity in your portraiture, with the way you, with the way your subjects, and they're your family. So I'm sorry if I'm making that kind of distant, but the way your family, you know, looks at the camera. And I think it's very important that you're recognizing maybe the way that your family is posed also speaks to larger cultural issues. I think you're very astute in making that distinction or discovery. And there's something kind of, I think you're almost on an exploration, not so much about your family, but really about yourself. You know, your family is a stand-in for your personal journey, perhaps. And I think that this is also what makes the work, again, resonate so clearly to me. You're painting what you know. And can we fast forward to the image of your Aunt Mary on the porch? There we go. This has a really interesting quality for me, like Edward Hopper. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, there's something, I mean, there's clearly somebody in the portrait, but they're not quite connecting with the viewer. Almost like the image is about this person's psychological world, like this inner psychological world, and yet there's also this outer psychological context with the building that's a little bit old, that, you know, is kind of devoid of other people or maybe plant life. I think it's very effective. And this is is this here in America?
This is Jersey City.
This is Jersey City.
Yeah.
Okay. So when was this painted, and did you block this like this, or you just happened to get the image this way? Was it an intentional image or something that came and you painted later?
It was intentional. I live with my grandparents, and we're actually 2 houses away from my Aunt Mary.
Mm-hmm.
So I would come home and I would see her on the porch every now and again. And before she passed, I was just very like fond of this moment that I saw her sitting there. And her husband recently passed as well, so she got sick and sort of slowly kind of started to go away. So I think it was about trying to go back to that moment, except I didn't have her as a reference. So I really tried my best to kind of sit her there with like the energy that I felt from her that day.
Mm-hmm. So it says something about you as well as
Mm-hmm.
your aunt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very effective. It's very haunting. It's a nice tribute, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Jane, there's one person, is maybe student, Jay asked Olivia if your process for internally balancing the duality between your identity and the identity of your strong relatives, is that kind of difficult to do?
The process for internally balancing the duality. Yes, it is difficult because they have different viewpoints on life and how people operate, and so I think it was difficult for me to try to find my place that I could feel like accepted but also true to myself. So that was definitely a difficult process in the work.
Yeah. I just want to add, I really think that, you know, I know that this is a very personal subject to you, Olivia, but I also think it's very universal. You kind of encapsulate a lot of our journeys here. So there is I don't know if the word is universal, but it's certainly like a collective thing, you know, we're all here pretty much as immigrants. There's very few of us that are not. So, your journey, might not be exactly everyone's journey, but we all have something similar perhaps that we could relate to.
Thank you.
Okay, Katy, right? So Katy, I love this idea of bodies of water, the idea about, being at the beach, but also bodies of water. There is a relationship between the human body and the earth. Roughly 70% of each are water. And maybe there's also something about fluidity in terms of identity. Perhaps that can be overlaid over that conversation. And I think that I like that there's this deep psychological underpinning to your subject. They're just not straight portraiture. Before I heard you speak, I kind of was getting that. But I was thinking more about artists like Alex Katz, perhaps. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so there's sort of like an Alex Katz quality to it. But, I think that your subject is way more specific and certainly more feminist in dealing with body issues. And I think that, definitely as a woman, I can relate to that. And I think it's a very important series, and I think that it's particularly brave of you to insert yourself as a subject in this conversation too. Right now, you're taking images of your friends at the beach. Are you planning on continuing this project or this series?
So I've been thinking about that. One of the restrictions, I guess, with this series is that we only have so much time each season to actually make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some people tell me just have them pose in the backyard and imagine the rest, but there's something about actually going and being there and seeing it that makes it different, that makes it more, I guess, like authentic. So and like we have this dialogue going, like I'll be talking to the subject while they're posing, and like it's more like we're hanging out and spending time together, and that gets them relaxed, and I get to see them instead of like them trying to pose how they think I want them to. So I was considering this summer, I mean, now that, things are closed, maybe not as much, but definitely when we're able to go and do this again, I'd like to add more to it. I had some subjects who backed out or like weren't comfortable, but I'm hoping maybe this will create that confidence, or maybe they'll see, oh, like this is what it's going to be. This is your message. I want to be part of that.
Mm-mm. So I think it is important. If you think it's important to go to the beach, and I think it is, you're not going to get the same light quality. You're not going to get the same attitude from the viewer. There's something about being on sand and next to the surf that makes people behave a certain way. I wouldn't compromise that. You're just going to have to live with that limitation, I think. I don't think, and also I think part of your process, like you were talking about, is engaging the subject and getting them to feel relaxed, which is essentially like portrait photography. And one of the things I was thinking of is what happens when you run out of friends? Not just what happens when you run out of summer. Do you have to make new friends, or do you get out of your comfort zone and maybe start engaging a new circle of people? That might be a challenge for you, because I see that you're working out certain, body insecurities, let's say. And as a female, I feel comfortable saying that to you.
Yeah.
You're working out some insecurities on your end, and I do the same thing in my art, so I understand. Maybe your insecurity, maybe getting out of your comfort zone, is to engage people outside of your circle of friends. Maybe that limitation or challenge becomes an opportunity for you. I don't know. Or maybe you find a muse that you paint over and over again. But I think for you, if you're dealing with body issues, it behooves you to engage as many women and get them to participate in this project as possible.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. That's a really
scary.
good point.
It's scary. I know
Yeah,
it
it
is.
is.
I purposely took a job as an educator when the year between grad school and getting my bachelor's, and it was because I was scared of speaking to people publicly. And so I forced myself to be an educator where I had to speak to random strangers 3 times a day, a few times a week, and it got me over it really quick. Scared the hell out of me at first, but maybe you ought to challenge yourself that way. And now I speak for a living, which is the funny thing. The other thing is I noticed that you want your work in a museum. I'm going to posit another thing. I think museums are where art goes to die.
Okay.
I like galleries. If your art goes into a museum, it's less likely to be seen by people because on any given day, 90% of that, 97% or 98% of art is in storage and not on view. I love the idea of showing this in a gallery where, there's openings and you get feedback from people and you can get congratulations and you can have a direct dialogue with people. I don't find you get that same interaction in a museum. I've worked in both museums and galleries, and I kind of like the gallery because there is that camaraderie and instant feedback. It's less philosophical and more visceral. Just the thought.
Okay.
Jean actually just wanted to say, interject that these students are going to have opportunity to have a real exhibition in the fall.
Yes, if there's no conflict, I'll be there. I can't wait.
Thank you. So we are a little bit pressed with time now, but can you comment on Justin, and then we'll have 5 more presenters.
Yes. There we go. Okay, Justin. So you're a very methodical person. It looks like you can almost have a career in marketing as well as graphic design. I love how fastidious and organized you are here and all of the different permutations and the graphics manual that you've laid up and all of that. It's really impressive. So I'm just gonna ask, I think I know the answer. Who's your market for this car?
Probably like younger people like my age, but I mean really anybody, because I feel like the car scene is open for anybody, really. Anybody who just likes it.
Okay. To me, it feels a little masculine, and I'm not saying that's bad. That is a demographic, men of a certain age or women of a certain age. But when I look at this, and I'm a car person, my dad was a mechanic, I love cars, but the marketing feels like manly to me. The shirts are men's t-shirt designs, the hats are men's hats. I would consider maybe just having some t-shirt designs or hats that would appeal to women. If you want to tap into that market, because women love cars too. Yeah, I mean, NASCAR, take a look at the audience. So that would open up your market a little bit, I think. I love the logo you've got. It almost looks like a car grill to me, and I'm pretty sure that's by design. I don't think that was by mistake or I'm reading something into it. I mean, it looks like that diamond is the grill, and the 2 opposing C's look like maybe the headlights or a stylized grill. It's very, very smart, and it reads like I'm looking at a car head on. I can tell you worked in this forever. I like the streamlined logo. It's almost like hearkening back to the golden age of cars and like the Art Deco period, 40s and 50s, things were space age, and yet it's got a contemporary edge. It doesn't look outdated. It looks like a continuum of that push towards technology and maybe space age. Now we're rocket age, maybe. So I think for all of those reasons, you know, it's a very clean, minimal, and effective design. And I'd love to talk to you about this more, but we might be running out of time because I talk too much.
Oh, it's okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but well done. Just consider, you know, maybe tapping into another market.
Definitely. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Sorry. We have 5 more speakers this afternoon. Next speaker is Julio Huamantupa. Are you ready?
Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Julio, and for my project, I have decided to illustrate a picture book based on a story that I wrote. The story is titled "That Mysterious Noise." So the story is about a boy who wakes up at the middle of the night by a sudden noise, and then he decides to step out of his room, trying to figure out what the noise is coming from. So he just walks around the house. Next slide, please. Yes, so here is an example of how the spread of the book will actually look like once I have it printed. So for the narrative style, I have decided to do a rhyme pattern to tell the story. I figured that it will be more entertaining and fun. I was also inspired by the work of Shel Silverstein and his books for this particular characteristic in my work. Next slide, please. So these are 2 finished illustrations. Each one is made on a 15 by 20 illustration board. They are entirely painted with gouache. And for this, I have tried to maintain a consistent color palette through the illustrations. I was just limiting myself to only use variations of yellow and blue to, in a way, keep the illustrations more cohesive through the entire story. Next slide, please. So these are my inspirations for this book. I was inspired by the work of children's book illustrator Maurice Sendak and his famous book, Where the Wild Things Are. And I was also inspired by the German expressionist movies from 1920. Next slide, please. So these are 2 more illustrations. These illustrations are actually in process, and it shows how I use the influences that I have mentioned before to create this distortion in the background to kind of set up a style through the entire book. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Julio. Next speaker is Ailyn.
Okay, hi guys. I'm Ailyn Lopez. The title of my thesis is The Blinding Condition. Next slide. Okay, so the blinding condition addresses metaphorical blindness, with gestural figures conveying the existential blindness that is inherent within the human experience. This blindness manifests itself in many forms, whether through the incognizance of the unknown or the willful ignorance of what one refuses to face. I call it the blinding condition because the gestural figures convey not being able to physically see the existing state that can be changed or situations with respects to circumstances of the abstract structures of free will. Next slide. This painting, Following Orders, it's very political, very straightforward. How many times in history have we heard this be the excuse? Just following orders depicts this blinding phenomena. Next slide. Blinding trust is about people blindly loving and trusting each other. These people smiling and not being held against their will in any way. In many relationships, we tend to blind ourselves for the sake of love and trust. Next slide, please. The She painting. The She painting was inspired by photographer Sheena She and political activist Kimberly Crenshaw. It's about intersectional feminism. Crenshaw, originating the term intersectionality, felt that anti-racist and feminist movement were both overlooking the unique challenges faced by Black women. She stated that the legislation about race is framed to protect Black men. Legislation about sexism is understood to protect white women. So simply combining racism and sexism does not therefore protect Black women. Next slide. Okay, the mother and children painting is my take on Dorothy Lang's migrant mother portrait, except for here the children are depicted facing the noise and the mother either faced against the wall of issues or at a stalemate. And that's my thesis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ailyn. Next speaker is Stephen Mosquez.
Hello, my name is Steven Mosquez. My major is graphic design. My project is creating an application for music, which is called Relax. My inspiration for my project is music, which helps me feel calm when I'm feeling sad or stressed. The goal of this project is to allow users to choose music that will enable them to alter their mood for the better. The user has to log in or sign up to access these features to be able to share this app with their friends or family. Next slide. So here you see there's actually 3 options that's featured in my application: calm, sleep, and focus. Calm helps our individuals to reduce stress and relax their body. I choose blue tones to soothe the eyes while using the device. Sleep is for individuals who have trouble sleeping and forget about difficult situations. I choose purple tones to have the feel of nighttime and going to bed. Focus is for users who wants to brighten up their day and helps them clear their minds by doing activities such as studying, working, and exercising. I choose yellow tones to have the feel of waking up and being ready to go. Next slide. The first feature when you use the app is music, which allows a user to save their favorite music and organize them in the library. The 3 themes that I mentioned before will have a specific genre of music that relates to calm, sleep, and focus. I also apply animation of wave flow when you're playing the music, as you see on the screen. Next slide. The second feature is guided auto meditation that allows the user to hear stories or different steps to ease the body and mind. There will be a different wave flow animations, as you see there, that follows the audio of the narrator. It has a similar feature, as I mentioned before, to save your stories or classes on the device. Next slide. The third feature is the mandala. That begins the animation, and the individual will stare at the circle shape that creates a round motion on the device, as you see there. So there will be also music playing in the background. I chose a mandala to bring peace and tranquility in our lives. As we know, the coronavirus forces us to stay at home. Most people feel anxious, depressed, and not able to go outside and spend time with their family. But this application will create a positive distraction that will make you feel relaxed. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next speaker is Tana. Tana, are you ready?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Tiana Salinas, illustrator from NJCU. And my project is doing visual development on T.H. White's series, The Once and Future King. I was enchanted with the old tale of King Arthur, so I've decided to build a world based off of this series. And my first steps were to create character design in prop sheets to help me further describe the world in my own way. The first character sheet is Guinevere, who is a very important character in the series because she is the fall of the Knights of the Round Table, which leads to King Arthur's demise in the end. Next slide, please. This is one of my prop sheets. It's furniture that is going to be seen in my illustrations. Next slide, please. This is King Palinur, another important person in the story who greatly influences King Arthur. He's also, he brings comedic relief to the story, and here I've illustrated his knight armor, which King Arthur first sees him in. Next slide, please. And this is Merlin, the most important person in this tale, because he helps guide King Arthur along his way. And this is one of my color studies of Merlin. In total, I will have 6 illustrations that will capture important moments from King Arthur's life to tell his tragic story. Thank you.
Thank you, Yana. Michael Spadola will be the last speaker, but not the least. Michael, are you ready?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Spadola, and I'm a fine art photographer from NJCU. The name of my series is Calcium Arrangements, and the subject matter is animal skulls. Now, before I explain this project, I would like to explain the project that led to this one. So before these pictures were taken, I took formal portraits, meaning just like traditional portraits of the animal skulls that I have. With these, while I was taking them, I always felt like there was more to them than what I was doing with like kind of just like the traditional part of it. And as I progressed through it, I found that the more interesting photos were the ones that showed the more unique qualities to the animal skull. Now, you can go to the next slide. So with this project, I shot the whole thing on a large format camera. For those of you that don't know, a large format camera is one that looks like an accordion. It's like the classic one with the hood and everything. With this camera, it forces you to look at the images upside down. And because of that, it forced me to look at the subject matter that I knew very well in a whole new way. So the whole idea behind the project is just pursuing your curiosities. And like I said, with the last project that I did prior to this one, I felt like there was more and that I just didn't really know how to find what I was after. So I took a break from it. I went back a few months later with a different camera, which to me is just a different tool. It's something that forces you to just have a different perspective. And the 4x5 allowed me to do exactly what I was originally after. Now, with the name Calcium Arrangements, that refers to the subject matter of it being a skull because they're made out of calcium. And while I was composing each photo, I was arranging them in the way that I wanted them to be arranged in. So I was sculpting them with light and like moving them around and just manipulating them how I felt that they should be presented. Now with each of them, there was no particular goal with each photo. So I didn't really know what was happening while it was happening. I just knew I either liked something or I didn't like it. So some of the photos would take me like 2 to 3 hours just to compose, and then I would decide if I liked it or not. And with that, the whole time while I was doing it, I felt like I was almost exploring like in a way. You could go to the next one. So like I said before, like each photo, there isn't an actual definition to each one. It's more of a collection of a body of work. So like with this one, I was trying to emphasize the curvature of the actual skull and highlight the different surface textures of it, and then either with the light, hiding things or revealing them, and just viewing it in a completely different way than I have in the past. Next slide. So this one was actually my favorite one, which made me really feel like what I was doing was becoming something. So with this, I felt like I was exploring just like a whole new world, like the caves, the textures, going in and out, just really just exploring, because while you're using the camera, it's really hard to get everything in focus, and it's very technical. So you don't really know where you're looking at while it's happening. So I would get it to where I thought I wanted it, and then start manipulating the light. And that was a back and forth process for hours, and just keep going at it until I figured or found something that I liked. Next slide. Yeah, same thing with this one. Most of them, it would either be something new, or like this one, I want to focus on the texture of the antler, and then like the overall surface texture of everything, how it's obviously zoomed in and like exaggerated perspective of something. So I really just wanted to focus on like that really small detail that you normally don't actually get to look at, and just reveal it in like a new way. Next one. Same thing with this one. With this, just really wanted to focus on the overall texture of it, and then create almost like a valley and just something really abstract for what it actually is, because in real life, it does not look like this at all, which is why there's portions of it that are so black. It's to hide things that I really didn't want it to be included in it, and to create like that abstract landscape. And then next one, I believe that's it. Yeah, so the whole thing for me is just to keep pursuing things that you're curious with, because like I said with the first project, it was, while I was doing it, I knew there was more. I just didn't know how I was going to find it until I looked at it in a different perspective. And yeah, the whole thing is really just to follow your curiosities and then push through that initial like obstacle of like what's going on, like what am I working with, and trying to figure out how to best accomplish what you're looking at. And that is it. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Jean, we are turning back to you. Again, for anybody who joined us later on, Jean Brazil is a director of art galleries at the Seton Hall University, and also a professor in museum studies, as well as curator of many different shows, including pandemic projections, which she does out of her apartment tonight, 8:45. I'm sure she can give you information in the end of Q&A. Okay, can you, are you ready, Jean?
Sure. Do you want to bring up Julio's work? I think we started with him, right? No? All right, I'll just start. But if you can maybe get that up there while we're talking, that'd be great. Thanks. So I loved what you said, Julio, about keeping the colors simple, and I noticed that right off the bat, and that for me made it very successful, using just different various yellows and blues. I think that made the images really punchy, and I thought it was a smart decision on your part. And I love the different perspectives that you're using. It reminded me not only of M.C. Escher and his drawings, but also a little bit of Byzantine perspective, just taking it back a few hundred years with that reverse perspective that makes everything seem like a little bit tilted. And the choice of these very skewed perspectives, I think, enhance that kind of scary quality of the story that you're telling. Even the title of your piece, That Mysterious Noise, right off the bat, it instills a sense of wonder and a little bit of fear, but also like, I want to know more, like a kid. So all of those things are encapsulated in such a rather simple set of images and the title. And I also like your choice of fonts. What led you to that also?
Well, I wanted to choose a font that was more like I will say classic to make it look a little bit old.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's like a serif font.
Yeah, because font does convey a lot of information too, in addition to the story itself, the narrative, and the images that you're showing. And I love that you were so attentive to all these little details, even at the bottom of the page, the 4 with the 2 little dashes on either end. That's really old school. Books don't do that anymore. And I love all the white space around the text as well, because it makes you, it's not too much information, and it makes you focus on the story as well as the imagery. And again, I'm so impressed with everybody for understanding historical precedents, everybody's work, but in particular, you talk about being inspired by Sendak and Silverstein, and it's very clear that while this is your own story and your own images, that you also are building upon, previous work that authors and illustrators and people working with typeface have done. It's very smart, and it looks very simple, but it's actually quite an undertaking to get all 3 of these things coming together to work in such harmony. So I think you did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
And also the gouache, that was a really nice decision too, with the old school kind of medium. And you could have easily chose to go maybe with something digital, but I love that you chose to hand paint this and illustrate it by hand. So again, thank you. I love it. Okay, so is it Ailyn? I'm sorry can you pronounce your name for me again?
Ailyn.
Ailyn, thank you. I love that you said Dorothea Lange in the image on the left, because the minute I saw that, it absolutely reminded me of that one, that photograph, that Depression era photograph. But what's different here, as you noted, is that the mother's back is to the viewer and the children are facing the viewer. But it still reads like a Lange. And it's just so accomplished and so smart, and it read that way immediately because I was able to look at the PowerPoint before any of you spoke. I think Deborah or Midori, your professor, shared it with me in advance, and it's a really effective device to borrow from something that's so familiar and so historical, and yet bringing it into the present and making your own image out of it. So kudos to you for that. The second image, I love also that you've chosen to put these 3 figures in a military uniform, in camo or dress or fatigues. It reminds me very much of Soviet era propaganda posters. I don't know if you're familiar with those or are thinking of those. You're laughing. Was that a consideration?
Definitely, they definitely do. They have that propaganda-like essence, which is totally my intention.
Mm-hmm. It reads that way, and I love that you're thinking not just of WPA photography, but graphic posters from like the 19 teens, and then lending itself to our present day situation. Everything old is new again, right? And then bringing the conversation, into present, talking about abstract structures of free will. Are you familiar with Noam Chomsky?
Sounds familiar. I can't.
You should take note of it. Noam, Noamchomsky. He's a linguist from MIT, but he's also a brilliant theorist, and he's in his 90s now. He's still alive, but he has this idea of informed consent. Sorry, which basically it's like we're agreeing to like our own our own misuse, our own entrapment, our own enslavement. And it resonates, again, his theories with what's going on presently. Not to get too political, read into it what you want. I won't elaborate, but I think we're on the same page. But yeah, these very simple images speak volumes, and this idea of being blind and also concealing the faces of your subjects, kind of like it's there's this presence and yet denial of who these people are and what they're kind of being fed, or what they're thinking, and conformity and lack thereof, or yeah, it's kind of scary, but it's very effective.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, I have a question. What is can you just explain the pink on that the two female figures on her nose, and the others on the other figure's hands? What is that symbolic of?
The fingers are a tribute to the intersectional feminist side, and the pink nose is kind of depicting like a clown. And that's kind of like my own touch on like that message.
It's a nice subtle touch.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I just love that how, you know, we're not able to really catch their gaze, which is sort of what our job as the viewer is. We're denied that gaze and that connection to the subject, which I think is part of your point. So thank you. Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, Stephen. So this is a very interesting idea of this app. It's got a lot of interdisciplinary components that you're dealing with. I think you're dealing with design, maybe a little bit of programming because there's an app there, certainly music and psychology, and maybe even a little bit of borderline spirituality and religion, if I'm not mistaken. Those all things you were thinking of?
Yeah, there's three elements that I try to combine, but mainly is music. So I want to incorporate like, you know, music and then the other features.
So have you thought about marketing this, or you're not there yet?
I mean, I'm thinking of doing it just to, you know, like because I see other apps there that's not like you know, that great. So I could use this app, you know, to do a little bit better, you know, than other people, like other apps out there.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly how, you know, people get things off the ground. You notice something that needs improving and then you tweak it. So that's great. Have you considered maybe, you know, working with a psychologist or somebody in the music industry, and maybe pairing up to kind of push this a little bit further beyond maybe what your area of expertise or knowledge is?
Yeah, I will consider that, you know, to learn a little bit more about it, because it's very interesting how, you know, like for us, it could help us, you know, it could benefit for us, you know, music and like psychological, you know, standpoint that we have, you know.
Yeah, and I like that you've also thought about how color taps into those different psychological states as well as the music. So the idea of the mandala is very specific to, right, to Buddhist or Tibetan culture. Have you thought about that, or are you using it more in a secular way?
I mean, I was like thinking more like the visual aspect of it, but I was researching a little bit about like how, you know, kind of like, you know, gives a little bit peace, tranquility, and on how, you know, like how the mandala works. But mostly I see like just like kind of like a distraction for the person. Like you stare at it and then you feel like a little bit like kind of having like a calm state afterwards.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe you look a little bit more into the idea of the mandala, just to make sure that, you know, you're aware of some of the traction it has in a cultural or religious capacity, and maybe it can help you exploit some of those ideas and integrate them into your app, because you're onto something. I think you can maybe push it a little bit further. And when this show comes about, I know, you know, this whole COVID-19 messed up everybody's lives, so this might not be the full expression for any of the students I'm speaking with today, but I'd love to see this animated if you could pull that off before the show. Was that one of your intentions?
Yeah, I just want to create like, you know, some animation throughout the app, so it's gonna help us, you know, to see like the visual aspect of it.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what you do with that when this all comes to fruition next semester.
Right.
Okay, and then there's Tiana. So again, I like that you're tapping into something. It's clear that you're excited about these legends and myths, and the subject matter resonates with you, which is always a, you know, bonus. Not even a bonus, I think it's kind of a prerequisite, actually, if you're going to make effective art. So where did this graphic style come from? What inspired you? I know you said you were going towards like old graphic imagery. Is it because of the period in which the story was written, or is there another reason that you chose this style?
Oh, well, for the style, it was kind of about finding my own style because I just drew it how I would without like anything in my mind of how it should be, and so it came out this way.
I like it because, you know, it's an old story, and again, the kind of like old style illustration taps into that period and reinforces that it's a traditional story. So can we fast forward to the image of Merlin? There you go. So is this what you expect the other imagery to morph into, or are you just exploring different styles? I was curious about that.
Some of them are different styles and color schemes.
Right. And what? I'm sorry.
I just want to try out like different themes for all of them and get the mood.
And so what did you learn from that? Like, did you have a preference, or did one style feel different to you? Did it change the story, or like, do you think it changed the something about, did they tell something different about the story using these two different illustrative style, one black and white, one color, one graphic, one looking a little bit more hand-drawn, even though it's not?
Yeah, my graphic illustrations tend to be a little more cartoony and bright, and my hand-drawn illustrations tend to be more darker. They look more similar to the old style.
I like that you're going back and forth and exploring, and I still think that there's more that, you know, you can find out when you go back and forth. I like that you pushed yourself to look at both. You know, obviously, if you're developing this into something, you're going to have to take a stand at some point. But right now, I think this is what, you know, being in school is about, is exploring, so that you can understand different styles and different ways they can reinforce or enhance a narrative. So what do you want to do? You want to be a graphic designer? You want to be storyteller, animator? What's your goal?
A visual development artist who creates the character designs, prop guides, and story builds for entertainment.
Great. So you're definitely doing the right thing then. You're exploring all of these different possibilities. I didn't even know there was, I mean, I know what you're talking about, but I didn't know that was the title of the person that did that job. That's awesome. It was like when I discovered what a curator was, and I was like, wow, someone gets paid to do that? I never knew. And last is Michael. Sure. Okay. Yes, Midori, I saw your note, and that's cool. Okay, Michael, so I really like that you're doing this old school photography. I'm an old school photographer myself, like dark room back in the day when you can do that, when you had like things in pans and you didn't have to put paper through a machine, and you can just watch it develop in front of your very eyes. You know, when I was looking at your images, I was thinking very specifically of like Edward Weston. Are you familiar with him? Something tells me you are.
Yeah, he's actually one of my favorite photographers. That's half of where I got the names from, like the arrangements.
Nice.
His Pepper series, or Pepper.
Yes, that was one of the references I wrote down. I looked at these and I immediately thought of that, and I was thinking of some of the Western photography. And I don't mean that in a derivative way. I mean it in a highly complimentary way.
Yeah,
I love the short depth of field. I like the dramatic lighting. It's clear that you set up these complex tableaus. I didn't know how complex until you described them, but I knew you definitely had to set up like a little mise-en-scène for the purposes of the shoot. Where did you get these skulls from?
So my mom actually has one. Like the first one I got, the horse in this picture was hers. She got it as a gift, like I don't know, like 30 years ago, and then she gave it to me. And then eventually, I started taking pictures of it for another project, and then I don't know, I just started buying more. I think I have like 5 or so now. So,
Nice.
but half of it is because of the project, just to
Okay.
have more to like photograph and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny because I hike a lot and I come across animal bones all the time, and all my artist friends are like, "Oh, save them for me."
Yeah,
So I'm always
fortunately, I paid for all of these, and they're very expensive.
yes. Well, you could have them for free if you can walk around the woods and pay attention. You know, I definitely, you were talking about seeing these as landscapes. I absolutely got that feeling. I mean, these could easily be like a slot canyon out in Utah or Arizona somewhere. And it's like an exercise that one of my photography teachers gave to me my first semester, which was, you know, try to really get to know something. Was it Robert Irwin that said seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees? And I think that's the exercise that you're kind of giving yourself, is like looking at these objects from a completely new perspective, and not looking at them necessarily as skulls, but maybe as little worlds of their own with textures and topography that takes them out of the realm of a static object into a complex terraform of their own, perhaps. The lighting is terrific. How much do you manipulate these once you print these? Are you messing around with the contrast and dodging and burning a lot, or not really?
So my darker printing isn't the best for the negatives that I have. So these are all done digitally.
I got to tell you, you're doing
severe editing.
You're doing a really great job, because normally I can kind of spot that kind of like high contrast, mess around in Photoshop stuff right away. And this looks like solid film photography. You're not overdoing it. Like, you're good. You're good in whatever you're doing, manipulating the images. You're just the right amount without pushing it too far. Do you have, so are these are all, yeah, these are printed presently. What kind of paper are you using?
Some of them are printed presently, but
okay,
they were printed on premium luster, just like the basic paper that I had for school, because that's what I could afford.
Yeah,
but
no kidding.
Actually being framed and like done professionally, I would like them to be done as C prints on something like a matte type of paper. So it's
like a nice Hana mule would be great if you can afford it.
Something that absorbs the blacks and then highlights like the highlights.
Yeah, these are going to be stunning printed. But yeah, this is really nice work. And I love that short depth of field that you're getting. It's really well done. Very accomplished work.
Thank you.
Okay, so did I go over? Yes. Sorry, guys.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, Jane. Really pointy comments and questions. At this point, I'd like to ask any of you feel comfortable appear in video. We are recording this, and we will make this available in the end after double checking if it's okay with you. And if there's any comment, additional comment from anybody. I see a lot of professors here. Lisa, Janet, Ashley, still there.
Hey, everybody.
Yes, we can say hi. And wanted to just applaud all of you for, sorry, I didn't really make my video. Applaud you all for making all this work during this difficult period. And, it's just not hard to, it's not really easy to keep your focus throughout this period. So is there anybody, oh, I see. Can we make everybody's video? Okay, I see Janet is having a trouble appearing. And Deborah, thank you so much for sharing the screen, preparing the PowerPoint. It's a lot of messages in the chat that I cannot really keep up with. So shall we Is there any more comments or question from anybody? Oh, Dennis, hello. I can unmute you. Let's see. Shall we maybe even mute everybody? Yes, you are unmuted.
Okay. I just wanted to tell everyone congratulations and good work living through this insanity that we had to deal with this semester. Not easy, but everybody rose to the occasion. Well done, everybody.
Yay.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agreed, totally.
I just also wanted to congratulate the class. It was tricky this semester, like we had to cut it somewhat short, but you guys really rose to the occasion and were able to get the website up, get your work in, sort of pivot quickly from having sort of this vision of an exhibition that was going to be in a space to having it sort of function this way online and still doing hopefully the show in the fall. So I commend all of you, especially some of you who've had like a real difficult time in this sort of crazy COVID era, that you're sort of having to function within this sort of general social space and then also still make work is commendable. I've listened to a lot of artists talk about not being able to make work during this time. So congrats for pushing through. The work looks amazing. Yesterday's group was great and today's group was great. So I want to thank also people for coming and supporting and coming in on the Zoom chat and sort of listening to them present their work because they work so hard on it and I'm super proud. So
I see Janet too. Did you want to comment?
I think I'm still muted.
No, you are.
Just everybody did a fantastic job. And yeah, I agree that with all that was going on, you all persevered and it's just wonderful to see and really a pleasure to see all the work completed and brought to this point.
Okay.
That's it.
So in the end, I don't know if you have any glass of drink. Shall we toast to all of you? I did prepare a wine.
Oh,
all right. Okay. And well, congrats to all of you, and I look forward to real life exhibition in the fall. And those who could not participate this time, we definitely look forward to seeing your work in the fall. Thank you. Yay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. All right. Well, so recording, I will make it available.